Hello random person, Sab Nino here. Search for SquarePants has finally released, and honestly, I had a lot of fun watching it. It wasn't the greatest Spongebob movie, but I would still recommend it, though it got me thinking about the future of Spongebob's filmography. And that made me ask the question, is Spongebob the type of property to get a 5th theatrical movie? Personally, I say yes. Technically, there's 6 films total, counting the spin-offs, but I feel like even if it took them a decade, they would eventually come around to making it. So I thought it would be fun to put my money where my mouth is, and discuss how I would personally execute a SpongeBob movie, along with a spin-off film. Let's start with the 5th movie pitch, which I decided to title The SpongeBob Movie Floral Dilemma. Here are some goals for the film. SpongeBob and Squidward Spotlight. So far, every major SpongeBob character has been given the spotlight, so I think it's finally Squidward's time to shine. Visually unique / fully animated. Since every SpongeBob movie is visually unique, I decided to push the limits. Since I doubt SpongeBob will ever go 2D theatrically again, I thought settling on a hybrid animation style could be a fun way to shift things up. I also want it to be fully animated since literally every movie is a hybrid. Even Plankton the movie, which is 90% animation, felt the need to incorporate the surface, to have SpongeBob back to its roots while providing something fresh. I'm taking the season 1 portrayals of the characters for the most part. Some characters are portrayed more modern to serve the story I'm telling, but I really wanted to give this that season 1 feel. And lastly, I wanted to make this lore driven. I've noticed most movies don't really tackle lore, so I thought that could make things more interesting. Okay, here's my pitch. Act 1. Frenchie introduces the ocean, which eventually leads to the world of Bikini Bottom, illustrated via Hillenburg-inspired visuals, explaining key locations / aspects of the universe. Frenchie reveals that the reason why Bikini Bottom is so lifelike compared to the rest of the ocean is due to the iconic flower clouds, powered by the sea anemones, those white and red flowers constantly seen throughout the show. Then the audience gets introduced to SpongeBob via his iconic "I'm ready." SpongeBob puts on his hat and knocks on Squidward's door so he doesn't become late for work. Much to his dismay, the two of them walk through iconic landmarks from the show, Goo Lagoon, Jellyfish Fields, Mrs. Bell's boating school, etc. SpongeBob says good morning to everyone at Bikini Bottom, while Squidward ignores it with headphones. Once they're closer to the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob offers Squidward to hang out, which Squidward obviously declines. At the Krusty Krab, they get into their positions as Mr. Krabs prepares them for the lunch rush, which are of course anchovies. After that, the Krusty Krab is on break, everyone is enjoying their Krabby Patties, and SpongeBob and Patrick are catching up. Pat comments on some ugly-looking fish, and much to everyone's surprise, it's a hyper-realistic anchovy. SpongeBob questions if they were a tourist, until the news turns on. The realistic fish head reveals that Bikini Bottom might be on its last legs due to low supply of sea anemones, since the Bikini Bottomites use most of them for everyday life. According to local marine biologist Sandy, if they don't find an alternative soon, everyone will revert back to their primitive state. Sandy says she's working on a solution, but she needs a specific kind of primitive sand, probably some organic form of hydrophobic sand. Naturally, everyone panics. After this, it cuts to Mr. Krabs' office. Mr. Krabs is the most upset because primitive fish have no money, so all of them brainstorm what to do, except for Squidward, who's rooting for it since his life sucks. SpongeBob shares that he's willing to find the next cure for Bikini Bottom, since nobody loves it more than he does. Krabs forces Squidward to join since it's a part of his labor contract. In the meantime, Krabs hires Patrick and Sandy to run the restaurant while the two heroes are away. Prior to this, SpongeBob and Sandy exchange walkie-talkies to share progress on their journey. Act 2. First order of business, transportation. SpongeBob and Squidward look everywhere to see if anybody is willing to help them go to the deep sea. But most people are either too selfish or too busy panicking. Thankfully, they eventually find a submarine, which is driven by the French narrator. SpongeBob and Squidward explain the situation, and Frenchie understands and decides to help them out. So all of them start traveling. SpongeBob is doodling in Frenchie's biology notebook, which Squidward scoffs at. While this is going on, Patrick and Sandy are at the Krusty Krab. Business is slow and the two of them are bored. Bubble Bass shows up for a complicated order. Sandy writes it down and gives it to Patrick, but Patrick naturally struggles with this order and gives Bubble Bass something that doesn't even look like food. Bubble Bass is about to leave, offended by such a display, until he transforms into a primitive bass, which goes back to the dropped food and eats it. Because of this, Sandy and Patrick go outside to see what's going on. The effects are slowly but surely getting worse, as more and more of Bikini Bottom is becoming primitive. Fish are becoming hyper-realistic, buildings are turning into regular mufflers. We even cut to Plankton and Karen, who are grieving over the chum bucket turning into a normal bucket with a glove on it. Sandy calls SpongeBob on her walkie-talkie, which Patrick promptly butts in to say hi to his best buddy. SpongeBob lets Sandy know what's going on in the most optimistic point of view possible, almost like a kid in a candy store. Sandy then asks how far they are, which they eventually find out is rock bottom via a bumpy fall which crashes the submarine. Squidward and SpongeBob are naturally worried about this. Squidward then starts to question why rock bottom isn't affected by the chaos of Bikini Bottom. Then they find a different kind of sea anemone, so they call Sandy to see if that would work. Sandy says no, since that kind only works in darker atmospheres, which Bikini Bottom obviously doesn't have. SpongeBob leads the two of them to the bus station. Squidward tries to ask if there's a bus to the deep sea, but since Squidward's rock bottomese is rusty, SpongeBob asks for him. They don't have any buses leading there because of safety concerns. SpongeBob and Squidward sit in the waiting room for 30 minutes to figure out what to do, but they later find out there is a bus coming up. So they go on it since it's some form of transportation. Squidward ends up hijacking the bus while SpongeBob tells everyone to evacuate it. Once they start driving, the rock bottom police starts chasing them. During said chase, Squidward can't get them off their back, so he asks SpongeBob to drive instead since he's worse at it. SpongeBob says no at first due to not having a license, until Squidward hits the truth bomb of, would you rather break the law or lose all consciousness? So SpongeBob takes the wheel and floors it, which makes the bus go faster. Cuts back to the Krusty Krab, which is starting to transition into a regular lobster trap. Plankton ends up trying to steal the formula despite the state of the world, since when the world becomes primitive, the least he can do is rule it. Patrick, Sandy, and Krabs chase after him in the restaurant as its most iconic furniture keeps disappearing. Plankton finally gets it and is about to read it, until he turns into a hyper-realistic copepod. Then it shows a hyper-realistic Mr. Krabs eating him. Patrick decides to quit since he doesn't want to waste his last days of sentience on labor. Sandy agrees and the two of them look at the state of Bikini Bottom. It's a war of the animated versus non-animated. Insert my leg joke here. Sandy gets increasingly worried, but all of a sudden, Patrick slowly transforms into a horrifying looking sea star and starts rampaging. This might or might not be a reference to that one SpongeBob horror comic. SpongeBob and Squidward reach Shell City Dead Ahead territory, the transition period between the animated world and the real one. SpongeBob is driving like a maniac while Squidward is about to throw up. He tells them to knock it off before he throws them off the bus. He then takes a breather and tells them to switch places so he can count coral from the window. SpongeBob does this and eventually finds the long creature from the first movie. The two of them run away from it for a bit until they jump off the bus, which leads to the creature eating it. Because they lost the bus, SpongeBob and Squidward then travel on foot. Squidward is ranting the whole time, while SpongeBob is enjoying the time he's been having with his favorite neighbor. They finally reached the deep sea, so they started searching for the quote-unquote magic sand. Squidward lets SpongeBob do all the work because he doesn't see a difference. This has nothing to do with the story, but SpongeBob befriends a hyper-realistic axolotl and names him Mr. Axis. I don't know, I just thought that'd be cute. SpongeBob eventually finds some rainbow-looking sand and gets excited. SpongeBob alerts Sandy about their discovery, which is perfect timing because 80% of Bikini Bottom is now primitive. And it's starting to affect Sandy too, but slower since she's a land creature. A primitive creature then eats her walkie-talkie. But SpongeBob isn't too worried about it since he took a sample of the sand with the test tube Sandy gave him. But when he walks away from the sand pile, he notices that it becomes normal sand. SpongeBob tries it again, and the same thing happens. Squidward jokingly asks if they needed to push Bikini Bottom here, as a nod to that one Patrick meme. But SpongeBob eventually realizes the sand isn't rainbow, but that it was lighting from a rock, making it look like it. SpongeBob starts to cry because he's failed to accomplish the mission. Squidward just goes, "Oh well," which makes SpongeBob finally snap at him, ranting about him how he doesn't care about the state of Bikini Bottom, and how poorly he treats him on a regular basis. Squidward is in shock since SpongeBob has never talked to him this way before, but he doubles down, justifying why he feels the way he feels. How how his life is terrible and how it wouldn't make a difference if he lost sentience. Then SpongeBob says, "Why don't you make it worthwhile?" Which Squidward has never thought of up to this point. SpongeBob then brings up that the reason why he's constantly pestering him is because he doesn't want him to die alone, which makes Squidward shed a single tear, which drops into the sand. This makes the drop of sand that hits it turn into a magenta color, which makes SpongeBob realize that they found the magic sand, but it was just activated by Squidward's tear. So SpongeBob pulls a nose hair, which makes himself cry so he can mix the sand with it in the test tube. Squidward then questions how they're gonna get home, but conveniently, Mr. Axis is confronted by a hyper-realistic shark. Squidward is scared at first until SpongeBob speaks in the deep sea language to it, which are just bubble noises. Act 3. SpongeBob and Squidward are finally home, and Bikini Bottom is 95% in its primitive state. The pineapple loses all of its color, the flower clouds are gone, all the fish don't speak, so the two of them try to rush to Sandy before it's too late. SpongeBob struggles because he's about to turn primitive, which is a big problem since these sponges can't move. But once he passes the tube to Squidward, he reverts back to his primitive sea sponge state. Once this happens, Squidward pauses for a moment since it's hard for him to see him like that. Squidward is determined to get the sand back to Sandy, so he rushes while dealing with his primitive transformation, which makes things awkward for him since normal octopi are much bigger than he is. He finally reaches the tree dome, which is just a dead tree. He tries putting it in the potion Sandy was working on, but alas, it's too late. The sand drops and Bikini Bottom is 100% primitive. We see establishing shots of the new Bikini Bottom. Sandy is a hyper-realistic squirrel in a spacesuit. Conch is a normal pineapple Easter Island head and rock, and Glove World is just an abandoned pile of gloves. It then shows Squidward looking sad that him and SpongeBob failed, especially since their last moment together was a fight. He then realizes that despite being primitive, he still has consciousness. So he tries to put the magic sand in the beaker, but it's hard since his tentacles can't grab the sand. So Squidward tries dropping the beaker on the ground and mixing it with the sand. There's a brief pause until he realizes the ground is starting to return back to its normal color, which ends up spreading out to return Bikini Bottom back to normal. Everyone in Bikini Bottom realizes everything is back to normal. Mr. Krabs even has a joke where he spits out plankton. They then realize that Squidward saved the day, and they all cheer for him. SpongeBob is also cheering for him, which leads to Squidward thinking that he deserves credit too. So he tells Bikini Bottomites just that, which causes both of them to get the recognition they deserve. The next day, everything is back to normal. SpongeBob wakes Squidward up, SpongeBob says hello to everyone in Bikini Bottom, and they experience the anchovy lunch rush. After a long day, the two of them clock out, and SpongeBob asks Squidward if he'd like to go jellyfishing after this. Squidward says no, which leads SpongeBob to leave him alone. But then he thought about what he said during the journey, and decides to join him and give it a shot. The movie ends with a montage of SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward going jellyfishing together, painting self-portraits at his place, and ending with a sleepover at SpongeBob's place, with the final shot of the movie being Squidward sleeping happily. And that was my idea for the SpongeBob movie Floral Dilemma. I really tried to make this the most unique film in the franchise. I wanted the stakes to be environmental since most SpongeBob movies use a villain as the main source of conflict. Now let's get on to the notes. Visuals. As I've stated earlier, I think a hybrid movie along the lines of Mitchell's vs. the Machines or Ninja Turtle Mutant Mayhem would be a nice creative choice for the next film. I did some concept art and tried giving the designs a rough around the edges feel similar to Hillenburg's Pitch Bible Doodles. But when the characters enter the deep sea, I was thinking the texturing would be less stylized so it blends in better with the environment, but with the same bouncy animation as the stylized segments. For music, I honestly thought it would be cool if they did cinematic covers of already existing SpongeBob tracks, so it feels more like a SpongeBob cartoon. Of course, if none of the music from the show works for certain scenes, they can just use an original track. I think the only downside to this pitch is that it would be hard to advertise. There's no big gimmick for this movie other than hyper-realistic versions of characters, but I don't think that's too marketable. Not only that, but there's no new characters, so that destroys any chances of celebrity casting, unless they want to do it with the main cast, which I hope never happens. I think that's the hardest part about focusing on story rather than marketability. But I hope you enjoyed this pitch for a 5th theatrical film. Now let's talk about the spin-off movie idea. Since there's only 2 spin-off films, there's a lot of characters that can shine. But I was talking to my friend Envy in a Zoom call, and she thought it would be cool if they made a Squidward movie. So yeah, these movies are very Squidward-centric. She even came up with the story for it that I decided to flesh out, so this is a team effort. So let's dive into Bold and Brash, a Squidward movie. Goals for the film: Squidward Spotlight. Duh. A return to 2D animation. I was thinking the show's animation style. Maybe some extra shading. If that's too expensive, then I think something rig-based could be a nice alternative. Unfortunately, this is just wishful thinking, and I feel like if this were to happen, they would just stick to the cheaper CGI of the other spin-off films. Comedy/character focus. Unlike Floral Dilemma, I wanted this to feel like an episode from the show, but maybe one that's more aimed at adults, while also still being appropriate for kids. Here's the story. Act 1. The movie starts with an avant-garde film that explains Squidward as a person, how he's an artist that nobody likes, stuck in a dead-end job with people he hates, emphasizing how Spongebob makes his pain even worse. After the film is over, it is revealed that Squidward is submitting it to an art festival. Everyone hates it and throws tomatoes at him. Conveniently, his shift at the Krusty Krab is immediately after this. Squidward shows up to work covered in tomatoes. SpongeBob was creepily waiting for him to return to work. As Squiddy walks into the restaurant, Mr. Krabs hoses him down since he was against dress code. Squidward's at the restaurant, and as his day couldn't get any worse, his first customer of the day is William Fancy Son, who didn't want to order, but just wanted to rub it in his face on how lovely his life is compared to his. Squidward raves and rants about how he'll be recognized as an artist one of these days, which leads to Squilliam laughing out of the restaurant. The scene transitions to Squidward venting at an artist support group. Everyone is falling asleep, but one guy wakes up and says that he lets a robot do his art for him, and everyone claps. You see, the joke is that AI sucks and that Bikini Bottomites are stupid. This makes Squidward roll his eyes. The session is over, so everyone leaves. Squidward was about to leave until a suction-cupped hand reached out to him, a fellow cephalopod looking for new talent, who I just decided to name Vince the Collective. He related a lot to Squidward's struggles as an artist, and wants to give him an honest chance, so they scheduled a time. Act 2. Squidward invites Vince to his house to show off his art collection, which could include iconic pieces such as Bold and Brash, which is where I came up with the title for this. After showing off his art collection, he then takes Vince to his music section, where he plays clarinet in front of him. Vince sheds a single tear. Squidward thought he was moved by his performance, but the collective told him that this was the worst artist exhibit he has ever experienced. Squidward is initially offended by this comment until Vince explains himself. Squidward's art is so terrible that it comes around to being good. How his art is a form of rebellion against the artistical norms. So he offers Squidward to make it to the big time. Still shocked by Vince's take on his art, he accepts it. Squidward is working at the register at the Krusty Krab, where he's uncharacteristically in a good mood. Mr. Krabs asks him, "Who are you and what have you done to Squidward?" He explains that he's been recruited by Vince and that he has an artist license to prove it. Mr. Krabs laughs hysterically at this news and tells him he's going to fail because his art wouldn't even be good enough for a Krabby Patty placemat. So Squidward finally quits by insulting Mr. Krabs and kicking Spongebob into the kitchen window. The Squidward exhibition is open at a small section of a museum, and he's anticipating the responses to his artwork. Monty P. Moneybags is the first person to show up, stating how he now understands Squidward's art and apologizes for being so mean to it in the past. He rates it 4 stars. William was also at the museum and eventually sees Squidward's piece. He's revolted solely because it's Squidward, but his entourage quickly leaves him to praise his art, much to Squidward's delight. After his big break, Squidward is officially inescapable. A montage is shown of Squidward showing his artwork to multiple exhibitions, becoming richer, and being recognized all across the ocean. Squidward is back to his Easter Island head, putting the last of his packages in the moving van. He reminisces about his old house for a second until bashing it since his new house is much better. Squidward is about to leave, but is stopped by SpongeBob crying on his leg. Squidward tells him to get off of him, but SpongeBob pulls a rope that he put inside the old house. Suddenly, a giant inflatable Squidward pops up with confetti, and Patrick is there to serve as a bubble machine. If it wasn't obvious, this was a goodbye gift from SpongeBob. Squidward calls the whole thing pathetic and walks away. At the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob decide that it's time to let Squidward go, in favor of a new cashier. All of a sudden, they find Squilliam Fancy Son near the restaurant doors begging for money. The two of them ask what happened to him. Due to Squidward's success, all of his support went to him. He tells the two that his life is ruined since being better than Squidward was his sole purpose in life. SpongeBob says he's better than him at being disheveled. Then Mr. Krabs offers him to become a better cashier than Squidward, which William accepts. Squidward now owns a mansion in New Kelp City, surrounded by other wealthy artists and critics. They're all throwing one of those boring rich people parties to celebrate Squidward's success as an artist. At this point, he's done these types of parties before, and wants to be left alone. So he blasts his clarinet, leading everyone to run in panic. Squidward finally has a moment to himself, alone in his mansion, walking through each of his floors. He finally has everything he's ever wanted. Squidward's paradise, if you will. Fame, fortune, he even reunited with Squilvia, but he still feels like something's missing from his life. He tries numbing the pain at a fancy bar to take his mind off of things. He orders the Sunrise Special, which is a wine glass with triple gooberberry sunrise inside. Him and the bartender talk things out, which eventually leads him to talking about his old life. At first he talks about it angrily, but then it finally clicked. His old life was much more eventful than his current one, so he decides he wants to ditch his fame and fortune and go back to his life in Bikini Bottom. Act 3. Cuss to the Krusty Krab. Squilliam is providing better customer service than Squidward ever did. Then, out of the blue, Squidward's feet enter the door. He's ready to reclaim his position as cashier and his house, which Squilliam lives in. The two of them have a showdown at the restaurant by giving the two of them cashier shifts to determine who's better via a vote from the customers. The votes are in, and Squilliam is the winner, so he naturally gloats in Squidward's face. But Mr. Krabs says that he's fired, which confuses Squilliam, since he clearly won. Krabs then states that even though he has the better customer service, having a former famous artist working there is better for business. So Squidward tells him to go back to his boring life as a rich snob, since he now knows where he truly belongs. We then see another avant-garde film by Squidward, where he replaces his problems with positives. It's then revealed that Squidward is playing it at the Krusty Krab. Everyone cheered since they know him as the former famous artist. Mr. Krabs is able to charge extra for Krabby Patties by having Squidward sign them, and everything is back to normal. It's not as grand of a scale as Floral Dilemma, but I personally think it's more fitting for a Squidward-centric movie. Envy basically pitched the idea of Squidward being successful and pulling a Squidville near the end. So I can only take credit for extending her idea, which I already thought was great. Thankfully, since it's a spin-off, I didn't have to think about celebrity casting or marketability, though oddly, it lends itself better for celebrity casting due to the new character events. So those were my pitches for future SpongeBob movies. I hope you enjoyed hearing about them as much as I did writing them. I'm sure there's plenty of room for improvement, but I think the initial concepts are a good start at least. What do you think of these film pitches? Which one do you want to see made? Should I do a follow-up video where I discuss bad ideas for SpongeBob movies? Let's start a discussion in the comments. And as always, it's all Sab from here.